This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Welcome to the Living It Out podcast. My name is Kelly Pagel. With me today, White House campus pastor Sean Bellner.
What's going on, everybody?
Hey, good to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, first time in the new room, so new studio. This is nice.
It is nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Small table though. We talked about that
talking about that earlier. Yeah. Small table, but yeah,
my long arms. I'm like I could hug the whole thing.
I love it. Well, thank you for being here today as we unpack the first week of Firm Foundation, our series on the book of Colossians.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I know you come loaded with questions.
Yeah, I do. So we've got some good conversation here, I think, as we were talking. And so my opening question was, have you ever experienced something that wasn't built on a good foundation?
Yes. Yeah, actually, so it is funny because if you listen to the message this weekend, Ben had talked about like a house, and how their roof was smiling because of the foundation, termites and everything like that. Well, yeah, my wife and I, when we were buying our first house, it seems to be like a first-time homeowners issue. We went in and we found, here's what you come to find. A bad foundation leads to a costly future. Uh-huh. And that was a lesson that we ended up learning in that.
The hard way?
The hard way,
oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So the difference was the outside of the house, the foundation, it looked strong. There was nothing that, looked bad until you got into the house and you went down in the basement. And when we were doing some showings or, going to look at the house and everything looked fine. And then put the offer in, bought the house, and the very first rain that we got, we went down in the basement and there was water in the basement. And we're like, oh, well, that's fun. So we had a company come out and they took a look and they're like, yeah, your basement walls are bowed and pushing in. So if these don't get fixed over time, those walls will collapse in and that's going to create all sorts of fun little problems. And so as we were talking, they said that the repair would be it was just over $25,000 to get our basement repaired properly. We were able to get them down to $18,000, which is still a ton of money, especially when you're a 23-year-old, and it was a lot. It was a lot of money. So, yeah, that was a costly repair that ended up taking place. And then fast forward to the house that we're actually in today, our current home. When we went and we looked at it, we were walking around and I was standing in the living room and I looked down, and from the living room you can look through the dining room and into the kitchen, and I'm looking at the door frames. I'm going, something is just not right, and the door frames were all crooked. I'm going, that's a foundation issue. Like something, well, we've been here before.
I've seen this
Lesson
before.
learned, right? So I'm looking, I'm like, these are crooked. And I'm like, I'm not dealing with foundation issues again.
Right.
Like, we're not playing that game. And
been there, done that.
Yeah, we've been there and done that. Learning lesson, right? This I'm
growing.
Yeah, I'm 35 now. So from 23 to 35, there we go. That's super helpful wisdom over the years. But we ended up, going back to the seller and we said, hey, this is one of the problems that we see within the houses that, these are leaning and everything. And the inspection came back, and the center beam that supported the house from the front of the house to the width of the house, it was rotted through. And so at some point that would have collapsed in, causing all sorts of other problems. And we're like, we're not dealing with that. And so the seller actually ended up taking care of that. So that actually cost them something in the end. But the foundation now it's solid. It's good. And what was interesting with that foundation then is once it got fixed, the door frames actually started to move back into position and started to get settled to where they should have been. And so there were actually 3 lessons that I learned along the way when it came to a foundation and what that is. And so I wrote those down so I didn't forget them. So here are 3 lessons. that I had. Okay, so if we remember a bad foundation, it did lead to a costly future for us, and then a bad foundation, it cost someone else long term as well. So there are times where it's not just going to cost you, but it could cost somebody else. So lesson 1, when you experience a bad foundation, you never want to experience that pain again. So whatever you are going through and experiencing, the foundation that we've built, if it's bad and crumbling on itself, when something happens, when rain comes and it starts flooding your basement, you don't want that experience again.
Right.
Things start to get ruined, right? So whatever you have down there starts to get ruined. So that was lesson 1. Lesson 2 that I had was someone else's bad foundation, if we're not careful, can affect your life as well.
Ooh, that's...
So, yeah. So
we could spend a lot of time on that one, couldn't we?
We could spend some time on that one. But yeah, so the foundation that somebody else has in their life, if we're not careful,
right,
that can affect us negatively and be costly to our own personal life as well. And then the third lesson that I had from that was when the foundation is fixed, things start to go back into place. So just because a foundation is bad doesn't mean it is always going to be bad. Like there can be times where you recognize something, you're like, this is a bad foundation, but we can rebuild it. And not only when we rebuild it will it be strong, but it will start to put things that were shifted out of place, it will start to put them back into the proper place. So those were the 3 lessons on foundation that I learned through a little bit of hard knocks.
I was going to say, the school of life,
yes,
hard knocks school of life.
The school of life.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, and some great takeaways that we can, as we talk through the scripture in Colossians, that we can go back and think about.
Yep.
So yeah, I can't wait to dive into some of those because there's a lot there. And encouragement. I love how you ended that last one with encouragement that what's there now doesn't have to stay there. So yeah, so let's dive in a little bit to the message, and then we'll come back to those 3, or at least a couple of those 3. Hopefully, we'll have time to unpack and what that means for us in our lives practically. So, as you probably know, listeners, we are unpacking the book of Colossians the next 4 weeks, and we were in Colossians 1 this week. Ben walked us through all about the firm foundation. And can you give just a quick snapshot, Sean, of what some of the highlights were from that message, because it was great. So if you haven't seen it, go back and see it.
Yeah, I'm going to encourage you to go back and see it, because there was a lot there that to unpack that here would be it would take a long time.
Yeah.
But the baseline of everything was that Jesus is our firm foundation. And so the question that was posed, I believe it was posed in the message. I don't remember if it was in the message or the discussion questions, but what is the foundation for our faith? That was the message, because Ben unpacked that, and it was that it was our beliefs. Mm-hmm. So what we believe is true about God and about you. And that was really what we started to unpack. And so as I was sitting on that and thinking about that a little more, I was like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's like when you know who made you and you believe that, those beliefs, they actually start to shape our behavior in our life. And our foundation then is able to be built on Christ, and going, I know who God created me to be. Mm-hmm. And when everything else starts to crumble in around me, I at least have my foundation to fall back on.
Yeah.
And so that's, those were a couple of the things that for me, just stuck out throughout the message. And it got me thinking. I was reading a book, and the author, Chris Voss, he actually got into some beliefs, and it was super interesting kind of how we talked about it this weekend. And then as I was reading through this book, Never Split the Difference, that's the book. He said that there are few social interactions that lead to actual behavior change. So if we take a look at that and go, what's that look like for our life? Well, like, somebody can tell you something, and you can even mentally go, yeah, you're right, but it's going to lead to very limited change within our life. But when we know who God has made us to be, that will actually lead to a lifelong change. It's like when we change the heart, the behaviors and the foundation of our life changes. So you can actually change a thought, or mentally for a while you can get into a place where you're sitting in a situation where you're like, oh yeah, I did this, I don't want to do that anymore. But if it doesn't move from head to heart, then you just fall back into doing the same thing. And one of the examples that he had used, he said patients with a heart disease that are recovering from surgery, they're grateful when they recover from the surgery. And they even say things like, I will change, because they don't want to experience what they did that led them to the surgery that they had to have. But he said that study after study actually showed that nothing changes.
Interesting.
So no matter, like, even though it jacked their life up, it was like, because it wasn't a thing that moved from head to
Not head
heart,
knowledge to heart knowledge.
they fell back into the same rhythms. He said 2 years after their operation, more than 90% of the patients haven't changed their lifestyle at all.
Wow.
So
even with something that significant, I mean,
yes,
heart surgery is no small thing.
it's no small thing. So if we can't say, like, that's right, and get to a place of going like, that's right, that's who I am, that's who God had created me to be, who he says that I am, we can expect to slip back into like our old beliefs, our old patterns, our old way of living, because we made a mental change, but we haven't made a heart change. And that's some of the nuances within that.
Yeah, that's fantastic to think about. It really points out how critical or crucial it is to set the foundation of our heart on Christ if we want change to be maintained.
Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really neat to get it from two sources. Obviously we have the message source, but then to read it and get a slightly different angle and think about it from that standpoint is really intriguing.
And he's not a Christian author, so it's like,
oh wow,
it was taking some of the context that he was speaking about, and so it was like message and a little bit of, I was like, okay, these two things can very similarly go hand in hand.
Yeah. That's really interesting to think about. And so, as we think about those core beliefs that we want to really utilize as our foundation, what are things that people should be focusing on or thinking about and to begin that whole process?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at the beginning part of Colossians, and Paul and Timothy are writing this, and it really is, it's an encouragement. Like he's commending them of their spiritual health, and I think for us, it's sitting back and going, if we were to kind of push the question back and going, where am I at spiritually? Like, what is the spiritual health meter in my life? Where is that? Like, is it full? Is it half? Am I empty? And Paul here, though, he is commending the Colossians with the health of their spiritual life, and Paul had never visited them. So this is a letter that he wrote to a group of people that he never met and in person. And so when you go through and you're looking at, I'm trying to find the verse. I think it's verse 9. He says, "So we have not stopped praying for you since we first heard about you. We ask God to give you complete knowledge of his will and to give you spiritual wisdom and understanding. Then you will live, then the way you live will always honor and please the Lord. And your lives will produce every kind of good fruit, all the while you are growing as you learn to know God better and better." And then he goes, "We also pray that you will be strengthened with all his glorious power, so you will have all the endurance and patience you need. May you be filled with joy, always thankful, always thanking the Father." And so he continues on, but within that, he prayed for their spiritual blessings and not earthly ones. So there was not this prayer of like praying for them physically, praying for them mentally, but praying for their spiritual health to continue to grow and continue for the gospel to be spread through that group of people. So he prayed for their spiritual insights. He prayed for their genuine obedience, for their moral excellence. And so that, in the end, it went to the heart of the false teachers at the time that were invading the church. That was the reason for his, commending them where they're at, because all these false teachers were starting to get into the church and leading people astray. And so he was just commending them and trying to strengthen them and strengthen them spiritually, to stay strong in the areas that they had already been strong.
Yeah.
So, and we know how that, like, encouragement too. You feel like at times when you're doing something and you're doing something that may be a little different than other people, you're like, am I on the right path? Am I am I doing the right thing? Because everybody, in like one little piece of encouragement can be like, okay, like I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so what a great reminder, I think, for all of us. It's like, if you know people in your life and you see them and they're living a life that is honoring God, and, their spiritual maturity or health is there and stuff, like, re-encourage that in them when you see it. And because it gives a little boost of energy.
Yeah. It really shores up that foundation that they have, if you can speak into that.
Yep.
Yeah. And likewise, I think if you need that, surrounding yourself with people who can do that to you periodically, which is where a group comes in to be very helpful. So I know you mentioned I think it was your second point in your foundation story about the importance of others in that whole process.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I think sometimes we can have the tendency in that first section to see what Paul is saying and go, oh, that's good stuff, but not necessarily embody it in ourselves. So I love that you highlighted that and used that as a reminder. Excellent. So as you think about this chapter and all of it, I mean, Ben, in the time that he spoke, he got a lot in, but there's a lot in this chapter. So what else stood out to you?
Oh, geez. Honestly, that one for me, what we just talked through, was a big one. And it can be tricky sometimes. It's like, I don't know if it's a path. I don't know, but where I need to be reminded at times to go and encourage somebody that I see living a life that is honoring God and they're being faithful, and also at times too where what a great reminder on it is okay to pray for someone physically and mentally and all of those things. But I tend to find myself leaning very heavy in those directions and very seldomly praying for the spiritual health, of someone when I'm like sitting and praying with someone and going, I think sometimes maybe that's what people need is just that reminder to go, pray for their spiritual insights, pray for that genuine obedience to God, because we know how difficult that can be. And the morals and all of that kind of stuff. So that for me honestly was the one of the big things as I was going through Colossians and doing the study and everything, that I'm like, that was a big one.
Yeah. I think that's so important for everything that we face in our world today. And certainly the physical is, absolutely pray for those things. But I love that reminder of praying for their spiritual well-being. Yeah. And it's easy to focus on the here and now of the physical or those type of material or whatever their particular needs are, but that's equally as necessary. So Good point. You had 3 points in the beginning. Run over those one more time, because I know I had another question in there.
Great. I may not have an answer. I don't know. So a bad foundation, it led to a costly future for us in the first story. Second one, then, a bad foundation actually cost someone else.
Okay.
So the first lesson was, when you experience a bad foundation, you never want to experience the pain of that again. The second lesson was, someone else's bad foundation, if we're not careful, can affect your life as well.
Yeah.
And the third lesson was, when the foundation is fixed, things start to get back into place or go back into place.
Yeah.
So those were the three.
Those were the three. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that definitely the people we surround ourselves with comes into two, and we kind of touched on that with the last point that was made. But with that third one, spiritually, like dive into that a little bit, and what that can mean for us on our spiritual journey. That if we fix it, it can improve beyond the obvious, which is.
What's the obvious for you?
Well, I think just that. Oh, well, yeah, it can straighten back up again, But I think so many people are left when you feel your foundation crumbling. You feel hopeless.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the conversations that I've stepped into recently. So that final one, I've experienced people walking back through the doors of the church again that for a few months I've had conversations and things around them they're just a mess. And they've been trying to fix it on their own. I know I've been there personally where it's like things are just a mess and I'm trying to fix everything on my own. And when we get to the place of going, I cannot do this on my own, I've physically watched the shift in people's attitude, demeanor, and how they walk back through the door, or it's a phone call or a text message, and they're like, I got things out of order and tried to do it all on my own. I need to make God the priority and put him back to the center of things. And it didn't change. The interesting thing is their situation didn't change. The things that they were hoping wouldn't happen did happen, but their mindset around it changed to go, just because this fell apart around me doesn't mean my life is a mess. And there's some pretty jacked up stuff. But their foundation has been made firm in Christ, and because of that, they are living a life now that is one that is just so different than was months ago. But they got back to the foundation of what once was, fell apart a little bit, and they're like, I got to rebuild that back up. So
that's inspiring and encouraging. I think that when we recenter ourselves, that it can crumble, and yet we can still have that peace because our foundation is what it needs to be.
Yeah.
So how do we? What are some ways that we can shift our focus? And the other piece I heard. When we get stressed, and myself included, we tend to have a really tight grip on things. And one of the things I heard you say was you surrender those things. So what are some steps that our listeners can take to move in that direction and strengthen their foundation?
Yeah, one, I would say we would have to, depending on where you're at, it's like re-engage in what God's word says. And do you believe it to be true?
Okay.
So, I know we've got the Colossians reading plan, and so it's like, dig into that. And it might be asking different questions than just checking a box to go, I read the Bible today, and so check the box. It's like, well, what are we asking ourselves? And I know we put together, some questions around the Colossians plan with a little bookmark, and which has been super helpful. So that's been cool. And then, group life is always a great, if we go back and it's like those lessons, it's like group life is a great place to be surrounded around, hopefully, people that are encouraging you and helping speak truth into your life with love, right? Like, I think it's really difficult to be able to love someone but not speak truth, but also to tell someone the truth not in love. So those two things I think should go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And when you have people in your life who are speaking to you with love, but also able to share truth, sometimes that's like a little bit of the reset button that you start to go, that's right. Like, I know I just kind of slipped away a little bit, and now, I get brought back into that, and you have a group of people then that you can kind of say, hey, keep me accountable in these areas and help me grow. So if you see me doing something where I said I wasn't going to do that anymore,
You give them permission to call you out.
Give me, yeah, you have permission. call me out on that kind of stuff. So that, those are just a couple of the ways that I would say re-engaging, asking questions when you're reading scripture, not making just a checkbox, getting connected into those groups, kind of stuff are just a couple of little simple ways to
Absolutely.
do that.
Absolutely. I love it. Yeah. I think, and that sounds basic and simple, and yet it's so powerful. So fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was wonderful. I really enjoyed having you on the show. I always enjoy having you, but
Yeah, thanks.
I loved our conversation and felt like it was very practical and
I hope so. I'm a
applicable.
practical guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you delivered. Sean, thank you as
Yeah,
always.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you so much for joining us, for tuning in. We do hope that you'll join us as we read through Colossians. You can sign up for the text campaign by texting READ IT to 419-419-0707 and join us that way, or using the questions on the bookmarks and the reading plan there. So as always, we hope this time has reminded you that you matter and helps you to live that out as you go through your week.